Good evening. We're gonna try something a little different. Several times I've shown trucks I've dragged home, trucks, tractors, anything else, and a little bit on how I've gone about getting them running, what I've had to do to them. So tonight, my neighbor and I, we dragged the 62 Mack B75. We brought it into the shop. END 673. This was rebuilt probably 25 years ago or so. Not a lot of miles on it since. We're going to work at getting it running. So all ready to start. Started draining what was left of the coolant out of it. Started a pile for my hose guy. I'm going to replace any soft fuel, oil lines, anything like that, air lines. Not that there's a lot on this thing to begin with, but I don't want issues down the road. When I get this thing on the road, I want to be able to run it. So I don't have to worry about blowing an air line, fuel line, oil line, anything like that. Fixing along the road's a lot more expensive than fixing it here in the shop. So aside from that, the first thing I want to try and do tonight, because I tend to have, with these Macks that have set a while, the plungers hang up in the pump, old fuel, moisture, etc. So that's the first thing I'm going to do is pull this cover off right here, which I already had one bolt out. That was had a clamp on it that held my fuel line that went from the inlet to the secondary filter. So what we're going to do is I'll get that off, and then I'll get back on the camera here and show you what I'm going to do in there. And we'll try and do a couple installments over the period it takes me to get this thing up and running. So stand by and I'll get the cover off and show you what's going on in there. So we've got the cover off. It's the next thing to do. Let's see if they're springy. So if you look in here, it just looks like a series of valve springs. So all I do, I get underneath these guys and I wiggle them. Surprisingly enough, these guys are all loose. So if you see, just get underneath them. You don't have to force them, but just get in there and see, that one's on the upside already. Okay. I actually feel pretty good since they move. I think this thing will pump a little fuel. So, like I said, I feel better. I always check that. I've had a couple of these that set 6 or 8 years, and those were stock. The most recent one I had to do was an R model that I had with a 237. I did the rollback that I had for a while. I had to do it. It set for 6 or 8 years, wouldn't pump fuel. And the parts truck I have currently that I'm using to help me with this, it needs the same thing. I just didn't feel like pulling the fender off parts truck that bad to get it running. So I'm going to keep pulling hoses off and get those ready to go to the hose guy tomorrow. We will work through checking over wiring. I guess for a little backstory, those that aren't familiar, I pulled this out of a barn or a shed last May, and this truck had not ran in several years. I'm going to guess about 20 years probably. There was, excuse me, there was no starter on it. Starter was in the truck, no air compressor, wasn't on the truck, wasn't with it. I got one from Dan Brown with the drive gear and everything, and then I just happened to stop out and see Dave Fulton, who I got a really nice Lund visor from, and he had a Reman sitting there, so I bought that. Between the two, we're going to make something work, and that's honestly what's kept me, other than other projects. I just haven't had the time or the energy to put a compressor on it, put a starter on it, and start going over everything. So my neighbor gave me a hand. We got this thing in here tonight, and I'm going to get through the fuel system top to bottom, get some fresh fluids in it. Now when I start this, I'm just going to put water in it till I make sure everything's okay before I put coolant in it. Plus that'll help flush any junk out of the system, and if everything's good, then we'll put good coolant in it. But we're off to a good start since the pump's loose. So on to the next thing, and I'll try to keep updates coming.